It has been estimated that approximately 2.5 million individuals pass away in the United States every year. With that 2.5 million lives lost, each leave behind an average of 5 grieving individuals. Grief is a regular response to loss or drastic changes in one's life, but the journey of grief looks different for everyone. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicherter, and today I'm joined by a mental health advocate who's passionate about normalizing the conversation on all things pertaining to mental health as she works to eradicate the stigma. Lindsay holds a master's in psychology and previously taught behavioral health science for 8 years. As a teacher, she recognized the impact mental health had on her students, and as she began to struggle herself, she decided to start openly sharing her story. Join us as Lindsay opens up about the grief she's experienced and what has helped her along the way. Lindsay, I'm so excited to have you back for your second time on Normalize the Conversation. Before we jump in, I really just want to check in with you. How are you really?
So first of all, thank you for having me again. It's always an honor and a privilege, and so great to be able to work with you. As you know, I admire you greatly and all the work you're doing. How am I really? In the moment, I am actually doing really well right now. It's very up and down. So if you were to ask me again in, let's say, 10 minutes, not 10 minutes, because we'll still be on here, but in the next few hours, that could change. It's constantly changing. And I think everyone's mental health, is very up and down, but, coming off of a hard week last week, I would say compared to then, I am doing well.
That was such a great and honest answer. I mean, it's so relatable, the ups and the downs. And I don't know about you, but for me, for so long, when someone would ask me, how are you? I wouldn't know what to say because it constantly changed. And then I felt like, oh, well, they saw me smiling earlier. We were laughing earlier. So now I have to be fine. But something happened and it triggered me, or I just all of a sudden just don't have the energy. It's been a long day, or I just something changes and I didn't know what to say. And I felt so embarrassed and ashamed that I couldn't have this steady mood. But mental health is really a scale, and we move along the scale every day, multiple times throughout the day. And that's okay. It's okay to not be super happy or super sad all the time. You can have ups and downs. So I'm really happy that you shared that.
Yeah, it's definitely on a continuum, I would say. And, I used to be one of these people that every time anyone would ask me, how are you? I'm okay. And sometimes if it's just a casual conversation, I think it's okay to keep it at that. But now when people ask me, I definitely pause. And if it's somebody that I'm close with, I give an honest answer. It's so funny. My therapist and she used to ask me at the beginning, as I walk in the door, how are you? And then it kind of just became I'm not good, I'm not good, I'm not good every time. So then after a while, I was kind of like, not ask me that. And I know it's an important question, how are you really? But it would all come out in session, so it didn't matter. But now it's kind of just a hi at the door because it's always going to be different. So yeah, I like that you ask that question in that way because people aren't always honest about it.
No,
and it's important.
It is. It's so important. Yesterday I was talking to one of my younger cousins and I was like, how are you? And she's like, I'm okay. It's fine. And I'm like, you're not okay. But if you don't want to talk about it right now, that's okay too. You don't have to talk about it, but just know that it's okay not to be okay. And when you're ready to talk about it, or if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here.
And I think that's such a great way to, start the conversation. And as normalizing the conversation, that's really important. I think we've come a long way with that. I think, I know when I was growing up, you're a little bit younger than I am, but, or a lot younger than I am at this point. But when I was growing up, it was just obviously you don't talk about it. I think you were coming up in an age where there was starting to be more emphasis. So I'm glad, that you can impart that on your cousins and the younger people in your life as well. And that's why, when I was teaching, that was something that was important for me as well to address.
And I love that you address that. And I love how open you are about everything. There's so much that's so difficult to talk about. And so many people shy away from the hard times. The posts you put out on social media are so authentic. I know, we've been friends for over a year now. I feel like almost 2 years.
No, more. Yeah, I think it was kind of soon after the pandemic had started.
Yeah, like March 2021, I think.
Yeah. Yeah,
Maybe even before. Maybe. It was, so I've really been so lucky and privileged to have kind of a front row seat to your journey and to get to talk to you and see all the amazing things you've accomplished and are going through, and still coming out the other end, having these conversations, making an impact. And I'm really happy that you're here today to share more about your recent journey and what you've been going through, because when it comes to grief, people often shy away and hide away from it. They don't want to talk about it. So thank you so much for being here. And if you're ready, let's jump in.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Such a nice introduction. I also was just going to say that back when I first experienced grief for the first time, and I think real, true grief, and grief can be defined in so many ways, right? So, we talk about grief for the most part with loss, meaning death, but you can grieve losing a job, you can grieve a friendship that just ended out of, whatever circumstances. So there's so many different kinds of grief. What I've experienced mainly, and what I'll be talking about, are losses where I have had friends and family members that have passed away. And I didn't really realize that until some, I would say a few deaths that hit me very hard. And those deaths took place in mainly 2021, where it was just like boom, 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 one after the next. But I had, when I was younger, for the first time, going back to what I was saying before, my uncle had died when I was 15. And that was the first time. Of course, you heard about, when I was in elementary school, people's parents had died. But I guess also, I thought I was kind of like invincible to having people that were so close to me pass away, because until that point, I never experienced that. So, neighbors occasionally and that kind of thing, acquaintances of family members and other people's grandparents and all that. But the first one that really kind of shook me really to my core was when my uncle died. And he was sick for about a year, and we thought he would make it through, and that wasn't the case. And I remember, and this was particularly hard, at 15, you're somewhat mature, depending on the person, but I guess, I don't know, my parents wanted to shield me from it. And so I was not even, he lived in California, and I guess, I don't remember it really being a conversation, but I didn't go to the, it was a very small funeral, but I didn't go out to California. I think what they wanted, I had just been out to California, and he was kind of in stable condition or pretty good condition at a few months prior. And I think they wanted me to remember him that way, and not to remember, being at the hospital the last few days and seeing the aftermath of his death. So I remember it was my best friend's, she's a little bit older than me, 21st birthday, and being at her birthday, not wanting to miss it, and just being so upset inside and putting on a brave face and not knowing what to do with that grief at all. I remember crying hysterically to myself when I was alone, and maybe a little bit, you know, in front of my mom. My dad had already gone out to California, maybe to my best friend a little bit, but really kind of keeping it in. And it happened actually over a school break. So I remember not wanting to go back to school right away. It was over our December break, and I think I gave it a few days, and then I did, and just kind of, you know, went along with life kind of like nothing ever happened, even though it really affected me greatly. And then a few years later, my dad's other brother was diagnosed with the same form, same cancer, different form, supposedly treatable. And I think I was 20 or 21 at that point, and it was very different. He was here in New York, and I saw him at his sickest, and I was in the hospital, and as he was dying, basically, and I saw how terrible that was. So I don't honestly know what was, you know, better. And again, I was a little bit older, a little more mature, but being there, not being there, having images, I still have images in my head of my uncle being so sick, just something nobody wants to really think about. But, and then seeing my other uncle, you know, kind of okay. So it was just, that was kind of hard. And it was like, I was reliving the same thing because it was just so ironic. They say it wasn't even like genetic or anything like that. Just really, really bad luck on the type of cancer that it was. So, or environmental, perhaps. So it was just like, it was replaying again. And then shortly after that, I'm an only child, and I'm also an only grandchild on both sides. So my dad lost his two brothers. My mom has two sisters, and they never had kids. And my uncles probably would have, but they died pretty, you know, at 40 and 50. So that was really, really hard. And then right after that, so my grandmother, who I was really close with, being again the only grandchild, which is kind of like an anomaly to be, for all four grandparents, the only grandchild, she got really sick. And also she was like the picture of health at 70, in her mid 70s. And she also, you know, they thought she could beat it, and passed away shortly thereafter. So it was just like, when am I going to get a break? And then my grandfather died on the other side suddenly of a heart attack. And I almost thought, you know, it was like he couldn't, you know, handle. My other grandmother was sick, and my uncle, you know, his son, my dad's brother, had all died, and it was just like too much for him to handle. So he just passed away one night in his sleep, and kind of came out of nowhere. So it really destroyed me. And I remember going to the school psychologist on campus and at college at the time, and him kind of saying that, you know, because I was like worrying about my other grandmother, and he was going to take care of her and all this stuff. And he was kind of like, that's not really your problem. And I was like, obviously I never went back, but it was just, I don't know. So I kind of shut down again and never really processed that. Was never in therapy about any of it. So it wasn't until I suffered these deaths later on that I finally talked about it, was in therapy, and became very vocal and an oversharer, perhaps, as I'm rambling.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being so honest and open. And I am so sorry for all of your losses. That's a lot to go through back to back at a young age. And to not have the tools to grieve, or know you need to grieve, and to feel a bit sheltered from it, and then to see it more closely, has got to be such an overwhelming experience. Did you ever feel like you had space to process or cope with any of it, or not until way later on?
I would say not until way later on. And I remember again being it was my last semester of undergrad, and I wanted to take the semester off, and then I knew I wouldn't graduate on time. And I kind of didn't care. And I said to everyone, you know, I can't do this. And I didn't really have, you know, my parents are very supportive in terms of what I want to do and all of that. But I guess I just had, and I still do somewhat, I will be honest, have a hard time sharing my emotions with them, even though I'm so close with them. I guess just because, and it's changed. And I'd say it's changed a bit recently, or it's actually changed a lot recently, but up until recently, it was really, really hard. And I ended up ultimately going back to school and finishing, and then just like powering through. And again, didn't really want to talk about it with my friends. I kind of felt alone in it, I guess, because people, as we get older, obviously everybody's starting to suffer more, or have more losses in their life. But I felt like I kind of had more than everybody else at that point. And just because of the level of closeness with those relatives, it was just really hard. And I had a few friends that I connected with that had similar relationships with their grandparents or whatnot. And, I did lean on those people for support, but I never really fully came to terms with what was going on until much later. And again, it wasn't until I had these very recent losses, or somewhat recent losses at this point, that it all kind of, came out. Or maybe a little prior to that, I started therapy a few years prior to these more recent losses.
I'm really happy you've been able to get therapy and finally get that support that you need. And I still resonate with the talking to your parents about it and your loved ones, relationships, the closest people. For me, talking to my parents about what I'm feeling is so weird. And
right?
I would have done it to a stranger all day. Like someone on social media post about it. My parents ask me how I am. I'm like, fine.
Yeah, I'm not. Again, also my family, I share, as you know, a lot, and I never used to be this way. I used to suppress everything, as I was saying. But my parents, my father's not on social media, and my mom and I aren't friends on any platforms because I share a lot. I don't share a lot about them necessarily, and, our dynamics and all that. I just, it's other people, but it affects me. And I don't know, when it comes to them, I really have a hard time, and I kind of shut down, and I'll show it by just crying in front of them. I have no problem doing that. I've never had doing that. But actually talking about it for some reason is so difficult. I don't know why. They're the closest. I mean, they're my life. I don't know.
I know. I wonder why that is, because I'm the same way. And I think part of it for me is when I talk to a parent, sometimes they're a little like, well, do you need to go into the psych ward? I'm like, no, it's not that bad right now. Like, I'm okay. I just need to talk. And like, they just come from such a loving and protective place that they want to like fix it, and they may go too far.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think they'd want to just instantly be able to fix it. And I know it's something that can't be fixed that quickly, and it takes a long time to process all of it and work through. And I think I kind of like have this feeling that I don't want to upset them more, which is not the case. They would not be upset. They would embrace it, but it's just kind of how I feel about it and how I interpret it. And I've actually gotten to the point where I've kind of said to my therapist, like, even, these podcasts, and I've been on a bunch of I've been interviewed for some radio shows and IGTVs and podcasts, like I was saying, and I don't share them with my family. And sometimes, they'll want to know like what I'm doing, and I'll, briefly just explain, like I actually told my mom today that, I was filming this with you, and I said what it was on, but I didn't go into detail. And, but I recently talked about in therapy, possibly like bringing my dad in and sharing some of the stuff that I've written. That's kind of, hard to, or the pieces I've written or the interviews I've done that are they've been impossible for me to share with him, especially, I think, because he is really my rock, and I just would never want to make him uncomfortable or upset him. And it wouldn't, but it's me.
Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
Yeah, totally.
But I love that you're starting to consider taking that step. I know for me, when I lost my grandfather and my uncle, I really isolated myself and didn't want to talk about how I was feeling at all to anyone. And maybe about a year later, my dad came to therapy with me once, and I talked to him about what that experience was like and the different things that I would say and what I actually meant, and just had a really great conversation. And when he felt maybe a little overwhelmed and didn't know how to respond, the therapist was there to really guide it and help maybe translate what I was saying, translate what he was saying, what the intentions were. And it created a space where now, I mean, I'm not always going to be like, let me tell you what's going on.
Yeah, no, I totally get it.
But I know that if like it gets bad, I can call him and he's gonna like take me out to lunch and just validate and listen, and may not even know what to say, and he'll be like, I don't know how to respond, but I'm listening. And it's just changed
just knowing you're there.
Yeah, it's changed everything. So I love that you're considering taking that step. And when you're ready to, and you do, I hope that you get that same value and benefit out of it as I did. And I can't wait to hear.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll definitely, I'll keep you posted. I'll probably end up writing about it, but he'll never see that part, but he'll experience it.
Can't wait for you to do that, because your shares are always so amazing. And on that note, let's fast forward to modern day and what's recently been happening.
Yeah, so in 2021, I don't want to get these dates wrong. In June of 2021, I believe it was, one of my closest friends had lost her mom in the Surfside building collapse, which I know you're very familiar with, being a South Floridian. And it was just devastating. I mean, it was such a public tragedy, national tragedy, and a building's not supposed to just fall down in the middle of the night. And seeing my friend go through what she went through was just horrific. And seeing her on the news every night, and just, she became a very, I would say, a face of Surfside, and she wanted everybody to know how amazing her mom was. And they had the closest relationship for a mother and daughter. And it was just so heartbreaking. And I wanted to be there for her in whatever way I could. And I ended up flying to, I don't fly really much, although I'm working on that big fear of mine. And I've written a lot about that just in general. And I had to be there for her. So no matter what, I was getting on this plane, I was going down there, and I did. And it was, I mean, I've just never witnessed something so tragic that just, again, should not have happened. And I think I had a little vicarious trauma. And thankfully, I had a therapist to process this with, whereas with those prior deaths, I had not. And I also, a few years before that, lost my grandmother, and that was also really hard. But this was, seeing somebody so young and so vibrant that you would just never, expect. It was just so devastating, and to this day is so devastating. And I have to say that my friend is she's been a rock for me after what I went through a lot after that, not knowing that that was going to happen. So that was kind of where this started, this little phase of loss. I don't want to call it a phase. That's not really the right, but this period of loss, I should say. And so after that, in the fall of 2021, so it was September, and I had just come back from vacation, and I was supposed to see one of my best friends. I have to say, as an only child, my friendships, and an only grandchild, like I said before, my friendships are like a number one to me. I have a very, very small immediate family, but my friends are truly my family. And, I've had times where I've had more acquaintances and larger groups of friends. And over the years, I've kind of condensed it down to, well, especially going through all these experiences of, a select few that are kind of my number ones that I know I can count on, through anything, through thick and thin. And so, I came back from vacation, and we were trying to make plans before we went away, and didn't pan out. And I came back, and we were supposed to get together, one of my best friends and I, the coming week. And we texted a little bit the week before on a Friday. And on Monday morning, I sent her a text to make plans, and I didn't get a response back to that text right away, but I didn't always get a response back right away. So I wasn't, really thinking anything. It's kind of, I text my friends all the time and don't get responses back right away. And that evening, I will never forget, I was driving, and on my screen flashed her sister's name, that there was a text there, and I was obviously driving, so I didn't, really check it then. But with the voice, I could play it back, and I thought maybe there was going to be something bad. I never thought that the words that I heard were going to be what ultimately had happened. And she died extremely tragically and suddenly. And that was just hit me in a way that I have never felt lost like before. And I guess, I just remember honestly collapsing, getting home, collapsing in the street, going to a neighbor's house, and just sitting there hysterically, getting in touch with my therapist. Thankfully, she happened to have a cancellation. She was able to talk to me for, I would say, a solid hour, which was incredible because I just did not know what to do. I thought I was gonna, I don't know. It was just, I still have like chills thinking about it. And it broke me. To this day, I am not the same person. I will never be. It's always going to be there. It comes in waves, when you least expect it, and when you, at times when you can kind of figure out, why it's going to hit you and when it's going to hit you, and anniversaries and birthdays and that kind of thing. And then 2 days late, not even 72 hours later, I had a friend, another very close friend, that I was also making plans to see, but she lived a little further away. And she had been sick, but it was supposed to be treatable, and she was doing okay. And I had spoken to her, and she told me her numbers were dropping, but they were planning on transferring her down closer to where I was to have treatment. And I also texted her, and, we kept texting those few days, and she was asking me about my other friend, and just so selfless. And she was in like, an hour of need, which I didn't know how imminent it was going to be. But so basically 2 days later, we were texting, and next thing you know, she's in the ICU, and the next day she was gone. So not even, going to my other friend's wake yet and funeral, and then having to think about my other friend's death, and just, I was destroyed. I didn't know what to do. I just was crying for hours and hours on end, going to extra therapy sessions. but this was loss again, like I've never ever experienced. And I think what was so hard was these were two of my closest girlfriends. They were my, contemporaries. We shared everything, and it just wasn't supposed to happen. They were 33 and 36, right in the prime of their lives, and, starting families and all of that. And it was just the worst. I don't even honestly have words to describe it. So that's kind of, where things went, and everything kind of snowballed from there, and just processing it after that and trying to get through that time period. And, the day of each of their death, I remember all of that, but then right after that, it was a little bit of a blur. So yeah.
Lindsay, my heart goes out to you. I love you so much, and I am so proud of the work you've done up until this point to be able to talk about it. But I'm so sorry for your loss, and I can't imagine what that grieving journey has been like for you.
Thank you. I mean, we've been wanting to do this episode since then. I mean, not right after, but there were so many times and I felt so bad. I canceled on you. I couldn't talk about it I don't even know how I'm talking about it now without breaking down. I think I'm finally in a place where, but I mean, I do break down later about it. Some song will come on, it'll be something like that. But it was just really hard because these were friends that I had met, I don't want to say like later in life, but a little bit later in life. So it wasn't like we had like the same friend group or anything where I could turn to other friends really for support. We kind of had our own very unique individual relationships. So even with my friends were so amazingly supportive, and people like you and just everyone wanted to be there. And in the very beginning, I kind of shut down, and I just knew like I needed my own time to kind of process it. But I knew that moving forward, I would need everyone. And I think that's hard when anybody suffers a loss. I just know for me, at least, it's, in those very beginning stages, you kind of want to you're so in a fog and in your own head, in your own world. But it's after that people start to, people come out of the woodwork at first and everybody wants to be there to support you. But then, those months after, year after, that's when I felt like I really needed people. And I'm lucky I did have people, and I do have people. But I think sometimes that's when people need help the most, that are going through loss and grief. And that's when people, everybody else goes back to their everyday lives, and you're the one kind of left to deal.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one thing that I really noticed with, my aunt when we lost my uncle. Everyone was, I had moved in with her and was trying to help take care of her and the kids. But in the beginning,
you do it for everyone. You take care of everyone. You're amazing. I can't say enough good about you.
Thank you. But that was what it was like, right? In the beginning, she felt really like she was isolating herself, and I was isolating myself. I really don't want to speak too much on behalf of her because it's not my story, that's her story. But I will say in the beginning, people came over and brought food a lot. And then slowly it stopped. And when you go from having everyone there all the time, and then suddenly it's like no one's there and it's really just you, and those feelings are really have a chance to hit now, that could be one of the most overwhelming things. And it broke my heart watching that and seeing it.
Yeah, I remember like those nights, the nights in the mornings were especially hard. You kind of go through the day, you go about your routine, but then it's like when you're alone with your thoughts, and, and then I would go back to, okay, well, how did my other best friend, I'm lucky, I have a lot of best friends, but, and some of them, our relationships have actually become, my friend that lost her mom, I think, unfortunately, in a way, it's hard to explain, but our relationship has become closer. But I think, you know, thinking about her then and how she got through it and how strong she was. And I just, it's like, if she can do it, I can do it. And it's not going to be easy. And I've talked to a lot of people that have lost, you know, children and spouses and just in horrible ways. And I think, you know, I've connected to them on a deeper level. And I can't even imagine every loss is so individual and unique. So I never like to compare anyone's journeys in general with mental health or with grief or anything like that. And you can't. But sometimes I look at them and I'm like, oh my God, if they, you know, lost a child, a parent in such a tragic way, and they're still dealing and going on every day. Because, you know, there were periods of time where I was like, I can't do this. And again, you don't really have a choice. You have to do it. But it's just, it's a long, tough road. And again, the pain ebbs and flows and it eases at times, but it doesn't go away. That hole is always in your heart.
Yeah, and I feel like that was something that I really misunderstood about grief for so long, right? I thought that you just get over it, but like you don't. You kind of move through it and you learn to exist. And you learn to exist in it. You learn to exist in this new normal where these people who were once with you all the time or just a thought away, phone call away in your mind, in your heart, are suddenly not a phone call away and you can't hug them anymore, hear their voice. It's never going to be like, oh, I don't care anymore. Like, it's fine. Like, it's always going to hurt. It just might not feel as consuming as it once did, but it's always going to exist. That love doesn't just disappear.
Exactly. And it's hard not knowing, you know, when it's going to hit you, because like I said, you know, a song could come on the radio. Music always reminds me of everybody. I actually wrote my master's thesis on the relationship between music and grief. And this was before, we'll have to talk about that at another time. But you want to read 100-page paper. Just kidding, obviously. But I always associate people with music. So that's, you know, it usually hits me in the car when I'm driving by myself and, you know, I'll start to cry uncontrollably. And then eventually I have to pull it together. And I do, but I have my moments and just like the little things, like I'm actually wearing, I don't know if you could see it, but this is, I don't know if it's backwards, my friend's, like any little tangible thing I can hold on to. This was one of my best friends. This was her handwriting on the front of a card that she had given to me, I think like the Christmas before. And I, you know, had them transfer it onto this little disc because I just, you know, wanted something that reminded me of her that I could have, you know, with me daily. I actually also have a bracelet, a permanent bracelet of, did that instead of obviously you can't really see it at all because it's very tiny, but I'm not really a tattoo person. So instead of that, I had a friend that designs jewelry combine my two friends' initials and make a little piece for me that, you know, is always here. So I always look down in it and I, you know, remember them and try to be able, it took me a long time to be able to look at pictures without hysterically crying. And still sometimes I do. It varies. And that's what's just, it's so unpredictable. And the 5 stages of grief, I have to say, for me at least, they really didn't come in order. And again, I think everyone's so different. And I wrote about this in my thesis, but I don't, you know, necessarily prescribe to that. And I think there's been some change in thought on the 5 stages in general.
Yeah. I resonate with that. I mean, for me, there's so many things. I mean, the music, like certain songs would come on and I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. Mm-hmm. Or I'd look through pictures and old photos and I just, like, I could remember it so vividly, and then it would crush my heart to know that I'll never get that again. it'll always be a memory. And learning to continuously grieve it. For me, the 5 stages weren't, that's kind of not how I experienced it completely.
Yeah.
And I didn't experience it in the order people say you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I still experience it sometimes. I still experience the anger or the just despair. And that's okay. And I don't think there's enough conversation, just reminding people that it's okay to grieve however you need to, for however long you need to. If you grieve for a lifetime, if your grief looks different than someone else's, all of it's okay.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, one of the things that scares me a little bit, it's kind of ironic in a way to say, but, you know, and I keep saying it'll always be there, but just the further in time you get away from, you know, the loss or that, not that you forget it, because you don't at all, obviously, that's what we're talking about, but you feel farther removed from it and you don't want to forget any part of them. So that's also been really hard for me because, you know, because like you said, there aren't going to be any more memories, there aren't going to be new memories. So it's just, you hold on to whatever you have. But after a while, you know, it's just hard. It's just, you know, I also, in terms of the stages, I have a lot of guilt, and I didn't have that so much with and looking actually now, I'm sad because I feel like I was robbed of the relationship I would have had, I know, with my uncles at this point, and even like some of my grandparents, because I'm very gotten into art. My grandparents are artists, and my grandfather was a writer, and obviously I'm doing all this writing now, which was something I never liked when I was younger. I remember I'd have him come over and help me with all my papers in school, and now I actually love to write. It's one of the things that's helped me the most through this, is journaling and all of that. But I feel like, you know, my other uncle was really big in the tech world, and he was like coming up in that, and I just always wonder, like, what would have, you know, happened with social media and all of that now, and all that stuff I'm into. And I just know he would have, you know, been a big player in that. And I just feel like these relationships, like now I would have, and I almost didn't take advantage enough of the relationships I had with them when I was younger. But I feel like with my friends that I lost, there was just this just huge amount of guilt. And it's not fair that I did this to myself. And, you know, I've talked a lot about this, obviously, in therapy. But the fact that I was, you know, away a lot over that summer before, and I hadn't, because of the pandemic, I hadn't seen them as much as I was seeing them. You know, one of my friends I was seeing on a weekly or twice a week basis. And then, you know, because of the pandemic, I wasn't seeing her as much. And I just remember, like, that week I was supposed to be making plans with both of them because I had just gotten back. So the fact that you know, I should have cleared out my calendar right before I went away. I had a day in between. I could have been there. I could have gone upstate to see my one friend, and, you know, why didn't I do it? And that for me was incredibly hard.
Yeah, it's the guilt. I mean, I did that to myself, and I still sometimes like have those kind of moments where I do that to myself. For my grandfather, for example, I went through this period of time where I didn't go to the wedding, my cousin's wedding. He died in a car accident right after the wedding because I had finals. And I was like, if I was there, I could have driven. I would have been driving, not him. So it's like I kind of played that over and over in my head and felt so guilty that I wasn't there, that there's something I could have done. And I did that with my uncle as well, just like these small things. Any small thing could have gone different or been different. And it's hard when you look back because you can see different things. Like we all could do something different looking back at every situation in our lives. Right? It's not just with loss, it's with everything. You can look back and be like, oh, I wish I studied harder for the SAT, or I wish I did this, I wish I did that, or I had the time, why didn't I do that then? It's it's hard when you can look back and see small gaps, but it's still going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, but it's never anyone's fault. It's never something that we always wish we could have prevented something, and we'll never know. And that's, I think, for me, the hardest part in learning to cope with those questions and all the unknowns.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, you know, my heart just goes out to you again, losing your grandfather like that. I know how close you are with your family as well. And I just, you know, I feel for you. And, you know, I wish I knew you back then. I wish I was able to, you know, help you again. It's everybody's journey is so different, but, you know, to have people there that have dealt with loss, profound loss in their life, it is helpful. You know, to have, I guess some people go to support groups. That wasn't really for me. I actually worked with, you know, in addition to my psychologist, who I feel like she saved me during that period. But I also worked with a grief specialist just on a kind of limited basis, also a psychologist, but his specialty, it was grief. So I had a limited amount of sessions with him after as well, because I needed more than what I needed, basically, you know, intensive therapy at that point every day. And having someone that had a specialty in that was really important to me. So, you know, whatever gets you through, and you just day by day, you know, minute by minute. So I just think something else that's, you know, has been helpful to me is finding something tangible to kind of honor their memory. So, you know, if a loss pertained to mental health, getting involved with a mental health organization, or, you know, if it involved an illness, getting involved with that particular illness's organization, one of their organizations, or if somebody, like one of my friends is very into the arts and into wellness and exercise and all of that. So, you know, giving back to the arts became important to me, and just anything that, you know, kind of ties you to it. I know a lot of people also, you know, if they lost a family member, start an organization, that kind of thing. I'm not there yet. I eventually would like to do something, but right now I'm just I've become affiliated with different organizations relating to causes that were either parts of my friends', you know, lives, or, you know, things that were important to them.
Whatever gets you through, taking it day by day, minute by minute, has been something that's helped me so much, because it's so easy to live in the past or live too far into the future and just trying to survive the next minute or the next day and just get through. It doesn't necessarily get easier. You get better at it. You get the tools that you need. You have the support that you need. And eventually it feels a little easier to get through the day. Lindsay,
Yes.
you've been absolutely amazing. Before we wrap up, what is one last piece of advice you'd like to give someone who's struggling or battling with grief right now?
Well, as I always kind of say, therapy, and more therapy. But just know, again, kind of what you said before, because I remember making a reel not long after this had happened, just kind of like a peaceful little like waves in a lake that I was visiting, and just, you know, you won't get over it, but you will get through it, and you will live on, and they will live on within you. And, you know, the memories that you have, and grief is kind of the price we pay for love. So I always say, the more you love, the more you grieve. And it is completely normal. And not everybody's path will look the same. And that is okay. You know, are entitled to your feelings. There's no timeline with grief. There's no right or wrong. So just remembering that and being easy on yourself, because I'm very critical of myself in general. And I know it's easier said than done. But again, with that guilt, since that was such a big part of my grieving process, and kind of letting that go really, you know, has helped me. And I still have times where I am caught up in that and the why, and, you know, I could have done this and I could have done this differently, and I could have seen her and I could have seen, you know, I could have been there. I could have, who knows? But again, just not beating yourself up too much for it, because that only makes it, you know, that many times harder.
Yeah. To anyone out there who's struggling, who's grieving right now, please know that you're not alone in this. You are going to move through this. And if you need support, there's so many resources available for you to reach out, check in with each other, and do what you need to do to be there for yourself, whether it's therapy, self-care practices, coping skills, holistic wellness, or just anything you need, or a combination of it. What works for someone else may not work for you. What works for you may not work for someone else. There's no right or wrong way to get through it. As Lindsay said, you just show up for yourself. You deserve it. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure getting to talk to you.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation, and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.